People don't hear what we say. They hear how we make them feel. A sentence in Hodo Anion opens up a world of unspoken things. Because in every encounter, before others' ears can hear, their hearts have already reacted. Just one misplaced glance, a voice out of rhythm, or a wrongly timed silence, and a conversation can end before it even begins. Leon's book doesn't teach tricks to be clever. It dissects how people connect through attention. Beneath seemingly minor techniques lies a subtle system of social psychology, where every nod, every glance, every breath carries weight. Every small action becomes a test of emotional intelligence and something that can't be memorized, only absorbed through life experience. The fascination of the book isn't in helping us speak better, but in making us realize the fragility of every interaction. With just one well-timed word, we can save a relationship, but with a single thoughtless gesture, we can shatter trust. Hodo Anion doesn't advise readers to become skilled speakers, but to become someone others want to speak with. In a noisy society where everyone vies to speak first, the ability to make others feel heard becomes a rare and paradoxical power. Those who speak less often have the deepest impact, because when someone truly listens, they're not just receiving information, they're creating a space for others to be themselves. Perhaps that's why each page of the book is like a mirror. It doesn't reflect skill, but rather reflects who we are when we're not paying attention, how we enter a room, how we smile, how we leave. All of it speaks for what we cannot say. The question is, in a world where words flood like wind, what remains in others' memories after we're gone? Is it the words we spoke or the feeling we left behind? And if there's only one chance to make someone trust us, what will we choose to say? Or will we choose silence at the right moment? Hodo Anion is not just a book about communication. It's a map guiding us back to the seemingly simplest thing, the art of presence. There's a silent truth that governs every relationship in life. People don't need to speak to be understood. A glance, a walk, a smile are enough. They've already told the world their story. I've seen it in people who enter a room full of strangers without uttering a single word, yet the entire space seems to lean towards them. In the first 10 seconds, the image you project shapes how others treat you. That's not magic, but the silent language of the body, of the energy emanating from you. People think they hear with their ears, but in reality, they feel with their eyes. Every movement, however small the way you raise an eyebrow, tilt your head, place your hand, or your breathing rhythm sends signals. Before words are spoken, the body declares who you are, and I realize that's what makes others want to stay close or leave. A hasty smile makes us seem superficial, but a smile that slows down by a beat, allowing light to gradually spread from eyes to lips, makes others believe you are sincere. I call it the slow pour smile, like warm water flowing across the face, both gentle and genuine. I once had a friend like that. She was naturally cheerful, always laughing loudly and speaking quickly. But when her father passed away and left her the company, she was forced to learn how to stand before seasoned businessmen. Her father advised, "You can smile, but don't rush. Let them see you think before a smile appears." She followed his advice, and at her first dinner with clients, I saw that smile. It was no longer impulsive, but contained certainty. Smiling slowly makes others feel chosen, not pressured. From then on, I observed powerful people, leaders, speakers, entrepreneurs. None of them smiled too soon. They observed first, then let the smile naturally surface. When that smile appeared, the entire room seemed to light up because everyone believed it was real. At the same time, I noticed their gaze carried an unusual weight. Their look wasn't just attention, but a connecting thread that made others unable to leave. Holding a gaze longer than normal is how you make the other person feel truly seen. I once met a woman like that at a lecture. She wasn't strikingly beautiful, but throughout the event, she looked straight at me, her bright, silent eyes never leaving. That gaze invigorated me, made me speak more clearly, as if I were conversing only with her. When the talk ended, I went to thank her and discovered she was hearing impaired. She was intently watching, not because she was captivated, but to read lips. But that moment taught me that a sincere gaze can make others feel so valued that they want to give all their energy to you. From then on, I called that gaze, sticky eyes, a look so full of honey that others feel your interest adheres to them, never letting go. When you hold your gaze for an extra beat, even just a few seconds, you show them they are worth listening to. With someone you want to connect with more deeply, let your gaze linger even after they've finished speaking. Slowly, gently, without rushing. It is in that slowness that their heart will open. If that gaze is even stronger, I call it glue eyes. That's when you continue to look at the other person, even when others are speaking. When used correctly, it creates a sense that you truly care about their reactions, as if they are the center of the conversation. In love, such a gaze can make the other person's heart race, but be cautious, for if misused, it can become intrusive. Every gaze carries the power of choice, either to make others trust you or to make them defensive. There's another thing few people notice: posture and gait. When we were young, we were often told to stand up straight, but no one told us the real reason. Posture is a sign of self-possession. I once saw tightrope walkers, their bodies tense, necks held high, perfectly balanced. It was that unwavering, unbowed posture that made the audience instinctively trust them. When I enter a room, I imagine an invisible string pulling my head upward, as if I'm gripping a hook on the ceiling. My back straightens, shoulders open, and a natural smile appears. That posture doesn't just change my physical form, it changes my emotions. My body tells my mind, I am confident, and my mind listens. When we walk with the gait of a victor, the world responds as if we have truly won. People who know how to enter a room always carry an energy that makes others want to yield space, want to strike up a conversation, want to be near them. Posture, gaze, and smile, three seemingly small things that are, in fact, the foundation of every relationship. If we master the first moment, all subsequent words have a place to take flight. People always search for the secret of charisma, but don't realize that secret has long resided within their own bodies. Try for once to stand still, breathe deeply, look at the person opposite you as if you truly see them, then let a smile bloom slowly. At that moment, you don't need to say anything at all. The world will naturally lean towards you. After touching with eyes and smile, people begin to move towards a more fragile milestone: words themselves. This is where most relationships begin to grow or die once the greeting has been uttered. What we say next will determine everything. Many people can approach, smile, shake hands, but after only a few minutes, they lose the attention of others because they don't know how to keep the conversation breathing. I've sat through hundreds of meetings where even the wisest people became awkward when they had to talk. They prepared ample information but forgot that communication isn't an exchange of facts, but an exchange of emotions. People don't remember what you said, they only remember how they felt talking to you. Therefore, the art of conversation doesn't begin with the mouth, but with listening. A good speaker is not someone who has much to say, but someone who makes others want to talk to them. They don't pour out words, they create space for the other person to step in. When you ask a simple question like, "What do you do?" let that question resonate like an invitation, not a procedure. Don't let it die with a brief answer. Follow up with a gaze with genuine curiosity. When the other person speaks, let your voice soften and respond with words that show you are truly listening. That's really interesting. Tell me more. Just that much, and others will feel seen. There's a secret in communication I always keep: make others their own favorite subject. Everyone lives in their own universe, full of memories, aspirations, and fears. When you touch upon the point they long to talk about, they will throw open the doors. A person successful in communication isn't successful because they speak well, but because they awaken the stories of others. I remember once meeting a man at a party. He asked where I was from. I answered my city, and he simply nodded, then moved on to another topic. That question died as soon as it was born, but another person asked the same question and made me talk all evening. He followed up, "I heard there's a very special cafe by the river there. Have you ever been?" That question pulled me back into memories, made me recount, and in the story, I felt myself come alive. Communication, in fact, is just a way of making others feel important. When you're in a conversation that's fading, don't rush to find a new topic. Look deeply into what the other person just said. If they talk about their work, ask why they chose that work. If they talk about where they live, ask what they like most about it. It's these small, unforced questions that will ignite the natural flow of the conversation. And don't forget one thing: positivity is more contagious than words. When you talk about something, tell it with bright eyes, with genuine curiosity. People don't want to talk to those who judge or complain. They want to talk to those who make them feel relieved, interested, and safe. Every word you utter is energy. If you sow gloom, others will leave. If you sow brightness, they will stay. In communication, the most dangerous thing is not silence, but the fear of silence. Those who rush to fill every gap with words often lose their charm. Silence at the right moment is the breath of a conversation. It allows the other person to feel they have space, that you are truly there. Those who have stood before crowds know, a short pause after an important sentence gives words weight. In a dialogue between two people, this rule still holds true. I always believe that when two people converse, they are jointly building a bridge with words. If one side talks too much, the bridge leans to one side and collapses. If both listen and speak just enough, the bridge will stand firm and become a pathway between two souls. So, every time you speak, ask yourself silently, is this person feeling like they're walking across with me? I've seen so many encounters die prematurely just because one person tried to impress instead of connect, just as I've witnessed friendships born from a seemingly small story simply because both were sincere. People don't look for someone smarter, they look for someone who makes them feel more at ease. And the miracle is, when you make someone feel comfortable, they will remember you longer than any flowery introduction. So after learning how to enter a room, don't stop at appearance. Learn how to stay in others' minds with sincerity. A conversation doesn't need to be eloquent, just real. When you are real, others will also become real. When they are real, the world opens up, and when the world opens up, the relationships you seek will come closer. Not because you speak well, but because you allow others to be themselves. There are people who walk into a room, don't say much, yet everyone wants to hear them. Their voices aren't loud, their words aren't flowery, but every word they utter carries weight. That's because they know how to speak like someone with authority, not like someone seeking attention. The difference lies in how they control the atmosphere around them with their speaking rhythm, their gaze, their silence. When you speak, the world reacts not just to the content, but to the energy in each word. Good communicators don't try to prove they are intelligent, they make others feel it without having to say it. They ask questions like someone exploring, not judging. They share opinions as an invitation, not a declaration. And most importantly, they know when to stop. Influential people are not those who talk a lot, but those who make others want to keep listening. I once attended a meeting where a young man presented to a panel of older directors. He spoke fluently, full of data, but no one was truly listening. When it was another man's turn to speak, he said only a few slow, clear sentences, but the room fell silent. I observed that he didn't speak immediately when asked. He paused for a few seconds, looking at each person as if considering what valuable thing they deserved to hear. That moment of silence was the key to his power. I learned that in communication, speaking rhythm defines credibility. Those who speak quickly often reveal anxiety. Those who speak slowly, with pauses, make others feel they are sure of themselves. A sentence cut off at the right moment can be more powerful than a long speech. When you master silence, you make others wonder what you are about to say, and that anticipation creates influence. However, speaking with gravitas doesn't mean speaking dryly. Truly refined people know how to blend depth with lightness. They know how to add a touch of humor, a graceful charm in their tone, to make the conversation lively without losing composure. I call it controlled banter. It's not about cracking jokes to get laughs, but about lightly dropping a line to remind others that you understand them, that you are not distant. In meetings, a well-timed joke can make two strangers suddenly feel close. I've seen many people fail because they couldn't distinguish between confidence and grandstanding. The show-off always wants to prove they know more. The confident person knows they don't need to. They listen a lot, speak little, and when they do speak, their words touch deeply into what others are thinking. The less you try to impress, the more credible you become. One of the hardest skills is responding when you don't want to answer. In the book, I wrote that if you're asked something you dislike, smile and redirect with a phrase as light as the wind. That's an interesting question. I'm still thinking about it. That sentence both saves face and protects you from being cornered. Communication is not just the art of speaking, but also the art of evasion. There are also times when we have to say things others don't want to hear. Bad news, rejection, or criticism. Clumsy people often do it bluntly, as if cutting off a relationship. Refined people understand that honesty is only valuable when wrapped in compassion. They use gentle words, a warm tone, and prioritize respect over correctness. When you make others feel respected even when you disagree with them, you win. In my journey, I've met people who can do this naturally. They enter conversations as if entering their own room, calm, unhurried, carrying a presence that makes others naturally adjust their energy to match. They don't argue, They simply ask questions that make others rethink. They don't try to dominate, they make others want to collaborate. That is the power of someone who speaks from a position of authority. Don't confuse seriousness with stiffness either. Truly charismatic people always know how to add a little light to their words. A slight smile when telling a story, bright eyes when talking about something they believe in, and emphasis using breath instead of tone. These small details make words come alive. Others are persuaded not by logic, but by the emotion hidden in how you speak. I once believed that knowledge alone was enough, but the further I went, the more I realized that knowledge is just the shell. Voice, gestures, gaze, those are the core. You might be right, but if you don't know how to convey it with humanity, others won't want to listen. But when you know how to listen, how to choose your words, how to be silent, then even when you are wrong, they will still respect you. So when you speak, don't think you are conveying information. Think that you are creating a space where others feel safe to agree or disagree. That is the pinnacle of communication. Not when you make others nod, but when they dare to speak their true feelings to you. Good speakers don't seek victory in words, but seek connection in the silence between two sentences. When we leave a room, people won't remember exactly what we said, but they will remember the feeling we left behind. If our words carry understanding, respect, and sincerity, they will remember us as trustworthy. And sometimes, that's all it takes for you to walk away like someone who has truly understood the art of communication, the art of making others want to listen, even if you haven't said anything further. At some point, you'll realize that no matter how subtle the techniques, they are only the beginning, because ultimately, what makes others listen is not posture or gaze, but the charisma that radiates from the harmony between the inside and the outside. That's when body language, words, and mindset become a seamless flow. No effort, no pretense. Everything begins to merge. Your person and your way of communicating are no longer separate. The presence of one person can change the atmosphere of an entire room. Not because they are conspicuous, but because they are quiet. They don't interrupt, but others naturally want to stop when they speak. In their eyes, there is genuine interest. In their voice, there is the calm of someone experienced. They make others feel safe to be honest. That is the highest level of communication when you no longer have to try to attract, but your very existence draws others in. Everyone has their own rhythm, and communication is the journey of adjusting frequencies to harmonize with others. When you enter a space, listen to its rhythm, people's voices, the distance they keep, the speed at which they speak. Harmonize before you try to lead. Clumsy people often rush to impose their own rhythm, while refined people know how to synchronize before taking the initiative. When two people are on the same frequency, every word flows as naturally as breath. In that process, the most important thing to maintain is consistency between the inside and the outside. A fake smile cannot hide empty eyes. A confident voice cannot persuade if your heart is full of fear. The body cannot lie, it always reveals the truth. Therefore, to truly become a charismatic communicator, you cannot just learn how to do it, but must understand why you do it. No skill can replace sincerity. Imagine you walk into a room, all eyes turn to you. If there is peace in your heart, your gaze will not waver. If you understand that you don't need to be liked, but only need to be real, then every gesture will naturally carry charisma. People sense this instinctively. They don't hear your words, they hear the truth behind them. At that moment, everything you've learned, the slow smile, the deep gaze, the weighty manner of speaking no longer becomes a technique, but a natural habit. You no longer play the role of a confident person, but truly are a confident person. You no longer try to communicate well, but simply live consciously in every moment. When you are calm within, you naturally attract others without. I once met a woman like that at an international meeting. She didn't say much, but when she spoke, the whole room seemed to soften. I asked her secret, and she just smiled. I just really listen. That simple answer made me realize, people think power comes from words, but in reality, it comes from the quality of attention. When you pay complete attention to another person, they feel it more deeply than any words. In your eyes, there is no calculation, only presence. And it is that presence that others seek. When I speak, I often think of a river. If you try to control it, it will churn and resist you. But if you flow with it, you will go further without effort. Communication is the same. When you stop trying to control the outcome, the conversation begins to become real. When you no longer worry about impressing, you truly begin to impress. Maturity in communication comes when you understand that the goal is not to win the conversation, but to understand people better. You listen to see another perspective. You speak to connect, not to prove. A correct statement is not one that makes you right, but one that makes both feel clearer. I've always believed that every encounter is a moment of destiny. Perhaps the person you speak to appears in your life only once, but if you are sincere in that moment, you will leave a gentle imprint in their mind. They might not remember your name, but they will remember the feeling of peace when they were near you. And if you can do that, you have spoken the highest language, the language without words. Looking back on the entire journey, I understand that every technique points toward one thing: sincerity. All the little tricks, from how to smile, look, speak, or be silent, are just tools to bring us closer to that sincerity. Because only when we are sincere can we touch the hearts of others. And when hearts are touched, all words become redundant. Success in communication is not about being known by many, but about making the person opposite you feel seen, heard, and understood. When you walk with that mindset, every handshake, every greeting, every conversation becomes a bridge of kindness. And in this increasingly noisy world, perhaps that is the most powerful voice a person can carry. It's not how much you say, but who remembers you after you leave. People won't remember your stance, your resonant voice, or your gaze. They will only remember that when they were near you, they felt like themselves. And if you make them feel that way, then you have truly learned how to speak without saying anything at all. In any room, whether an international conference or an intimate gathering, there are always two types of people. One type stands on the periphery, listening, but no one really notices them. The other type walks in, and within minutes, makes others feel like they belong there. The difference isn't in status or attire, but in the ability to become an insider anywhere. They don't try to appear familiar, they make others feel familiarity in them. People tend to trust those who understand their language, not spoken language, but the language of context. One person can stand among doctors, entrepreneurs, or artists without making anyone feel out of place if they know how to observe. That observation isn't curiosity, but respect. Every community has its own rhythm, its own hidden meanings, its invisible codes in how they speak, laugh, and react. When you understand that rhythm, you don't need to try to push in. The rhythm will naturally welcome you. To be accepted, learn to speak others' language before expecting them to understand yours. I was once invited to a party of investors. Everyone spoke the language of return rates, dividends, and market outlooks. I, a person only accustomed to writing and talking about people, initially didn't know what to say. But instead of trying to pretend to understand, I just listened. I noticed that every time someone mentioned a failed deal, they would give a slight laugh and say, "That's tuition." From that, I understood that in that world, failure wasn't a bad thing, but a sign of someone experienced. So I asked them about their most expensive tuition fees. That question made the whole group laugh, and the conversation opened up. I didn't try to force my way in, I just chose the right rhythm to step into. That's how to learn to speak others' language. If you're talking to an artist, ask them about their process, not their finished product. If you're talking to an engineer, ask them how they solve problems, not about the project they're working on. If you meet a stranger, let them see you're learning their language with your eyes, with simple but precise questions. People value someone who makes an effort to understand them more than someone who tries to teach them. Once you grasp that language, skillfully use it to connect. One person might be a lawyer, the other a chef, but there's still common ground between them because everyone wants to be understood. I once saw a woman integrate into a group of engineers just by asking about the things that annoyed them in their profession. They recounted, she smiled but didn't mock. She followed up, "So what do you do then to ease the boredom?" A small question, but it opened up genuine sharing. When someone talks about what they love and what they hate, they are revealing their humanity. In communication, understanding doesn't mean being identical. You don't need to know everything about their field, just enough to care and ask the right questions. A farmer can converse passionately with a scientist if both are curious about how a seed grows. But if only one side tries to prove their knowledge, the dialogue will run dry. If you want to be seen as an insider, don't try to prove you know, make them believe you want to know. And don't be afraid to step into an unfamiliar world. Every group has an entry point. Just find their keyword. For entrepreneurs, it's stories of risk. For artists, it's emotion. For researchers, it's discovery. When you find the keyword, you open the door. No one can resist someone who truly wants to understand them. I remember a friend who lives abroad telling me that every time she goes to a new country, she always learns a few greetings in the local language, not to show off, but to create a moment of intimacy. When she greeted a local in their language, their eyes immediately softened. They felt respected. She said, "That's my ticket into their world without needing a passport." In any environment, respecting other people's culture is the highest form of communication intelligence. However, blending in doesn't mean dissolving. Some people fear that by learning how others speak, they will lose themselves. But in reality, the most beloved people are those who both understand others' language and maintain their own voice. When you are confident enough to listen, you don't need to flaunt yourself. When you are stable enough to learn, you don't need to be defensive. It is this flexibility that makes you a natural center of attention. In the journey of communication, there's a lesser-mentioned ability, mirroring. This is when you speak by subtly reflecting what others are feeling. If they are anxious, speak softly. If they are excited, let yourself match their rhythm. Not to pretend, but to speak with the same emotional rhythm. Like two people dancing, one leads, one follows, but both need to hear the same music. When you mirror correctly, the other person will see themselves in you. And then one day, you'll realize that an insider isn't someone chosen, but someone refined enough to make others want to choose them. You don't need power or fame, just the ability to make others feel understood and safe. Then you can enter any group, talk to anyone, and still be yourself. Integration is not about losing oneself, but about expanding. Every conversation is a small world. And if you know how to listen, how to mirror, how to ask with genuine curiosity, you will always be invited to stay. Not because you are more prominent, but because you make others feel they have just met a part of themselves in you. There's a strange moment in every encounter when the boundary between two people gradually dissolves, and both feel they are no longer I and you, but we. That moment doesn't come from long-standing familiarity, but from how we create the feeling of we being one. A person can make others believe they've known each other for a long time, even if they've just met. And that belief, once formed, is the beginning of every deep relationship. Humans instinctively connect with those who reflect some part of themselves. When you laugh at the right moment with them, when your voice lowers with their sadness, when you unconsciously repeat a few words they just said, they will see you as similar to them. No need to act, just genuinely pay attention. So, listen not only with your ears, but with your entire body. Let your gaze, nod, breath, and pauses say, "I understand." When others feel you are on their side, they no longer defend themselves, and at that moment, all conversations become easy. A friend once told me that in negotiations, he never argued directly. When others said something he disagreed with, he didn't refute it, he just said, "I understand you feel that way." That sentence didn't confirm right or wrong, but it extinguished the fire of opposition. The other person no longer needed to be defensive, and it was in that moment that they began to listen. The feeling of being understood calms people down, and that calming is the gateway to persuasion. A wise communicator knows how to gradually shift pronouns in their speech. Initially, I and you, then they skillfully switch to we. It's not a linguistic trick, but a sign of companionship. When you say we, you are no longer standing opposite them, but beside them. We could try this. We've all faced this situation. Just a few words, but it changes the entire position. Between I speak to convince you and we find a solution together is a chasm of trust. Harmony can also come from small coincidences. When two people realize they like the same food, the same song, or have been to the same place, their eyes immediately light up. A sense of kinship appears. Even if only for a moment, a good communicator always watches for these opportunities, not to exploit them, but to connect two worlds with a small thread. Sometimes, just mentioning a common detail can change the entire direction of a conversation. A person can turn "me too" into a greeting between two souls. Empathy is not, "I understand what you're saying," but "I feel what you're feeling." Someone says, "I lost my job, I feel empty." If you reply, "I understand, I've been unemployed too," you're sharing an experience. But if you say, "I bet at that moment everything around you just stopped," you're mirroring their emotion, and when emotion is mirrored correctly, the other person will open up. True empathy is not in the answer, but in how you touch the other person's feelings. In intimate relationships, people also have a secret language, phrases, glances, or gestures that only the two of them understand. That's what creates a sense of uniqueness, a secret code that only exists between them. Among friends, it could be a recurring inside joke. Among colleagues, it might be a shared knowing wink. Between lovers, it could be a pet name only they use. When a relationship has its own secret language, it moves to a new level where people don't need many words to understand each other. I once observed an elderly couple in a cafe. They barely spoke. When the man gently tapped his finger on the table, the woman immediately poured more coffee. When she smiled looking out the window, he also turned to look. They were like two musicians who had practiced together their whole lives, harmonizing without a conductor. I wondered how many years it took to reach such synchronized silence, but then I realized they didn't wait until old age to achieve it. They started from the very first days by listening to each other long enough to understand the other's rhythm. Harmony cannot be faked. People can give polite smiles and courteous handshakes, but if you don't genuinely care, the pretense will show through. When others speak, put aside your desire to respond. Truly listen to what they are saying and especially why they are saying it. Every story has an underlying layer, and an empathetic person is one who sees that layer without judgment. Empathy doesn't just make others feel comfortable, it also makes you smarter. Because when you understand others, you see the world more broadly than just yourself. The most successful communicators are often those who can translate others' emotions into actions. They know when to be silent, when to encourage, when to change the subject. All of this is not memorized, but because they truly listen. When you can make others feel accompanied, you will never be alone in any encounter. Harmony is not born from speaking the same language, but from hearing the same heartbeat. Someone who knows how to blend into others' emotions is never lost in a crowd, because wherever there are people, they are always welcomed. At some point, you'll realize that empathy doesn't just help you converse better, it helps you live better. When you truly listen, you judge less. When you genuinely want to understand, you feel less lonely. And when you make others feel they are not alone, you, too, are healed. In a world where everyone is seeking attention, there is another path, more subtle, more powerful, the strength of a genuine compliment. A well-timed compliment can change a person's mood, but a properly delivered compliment can change how they see themselves. People crave recognition, not out of arrogance, but because deep down, everyone fears they are not good enough. A complimenter, if subtle enough, is one who helps others soothe that fear. However, the line between compliment and flattery is as thin as a thread. A compliment can be a gift, but it can also be a dagger if the listener senses calculation. A compliment is only valuable when the recipient believes it is spoken for their sake, not for your benefit. Therefore, don't compliment to achieve a goal. Compliment as a reflex of appreciation. The listener will feel that difference without explanation. I once observed a leader who had the ability to compliment people in a way that made everyone want to contribute. He never said superficial things like, "You did great." He complimented with specifics. "I noticed your presentation today. The way you paused for 2 seconds before answering made the audience trust you." It was that specificity that made the compliment real. When you point out a small detail that the other person didn't think anyone noticed, you make them feel completely seen. That's the art of complimenting like an undercover agent. No grandstanding, no showering sweet words everywhere, but light as the wind. Sometimes, the best compliments aren't spoken directly but are overheard incidentally from others. When you say something good about someone behind their back, sooner or later, those words will reach their ears and their value will multiply. Because they carry the mark of truth. You don't need them to hear it to still speak well of them. Someone asked me, "When is the best time to compliment?" I said, "When the other person isn't expecting it." Because a compliment given in an ordinary moment has more impact than in a moment of anticipation. If someone has just achieved something, the whole world speaks well of them. Your added words will blend into the crowd. But if you compliment them on a day when they are quietly working, when no one is paying attention, they will remember it forever. The golden time for a compliment is when it is unexpected. A compliment has power not only because of its content, but also because of the way it's said. Your tone, gaze, and attitude determine everything. A phrase like, "You look great today," can be a social pleasantry, but it can also make the listener feel genuinely appreciated, depending on how you look at them when you say it. Words are just the shell. The energy you convey through your eyes is the soul of the compliment. There's a technique I really like for letting admiration slip out. This means you deliver the compliment as if accidentally, not intentionally. For example, instead of "you're brilliant," say, "I don't know how you manage to remember every single detail like that." The statement is both an acknowledgement and as natural as an observation. The listener will feel it's more genuine because you're not trying to give a gift, you're just revealing a true feeling. And don't forget, compliments also need moderation. Too many make people suspicious, too few make them feel stiff. Let compliments be like just enough seasoning to highlight the flavor of the person opposite you. A wise person doesn't scatter compliments, they plant them. They know when the other person's heart is parched to drop a tiny drop of water, not to pour a deluge. I once experimented with this in a class. A student was very talented but always kept his distance, seemed aloof. I didn't praise his assignments because everyone else did that. I just said, "I noticed how you paused for a few seconds before answering," which made the whole class listen more carefully. He remained silent but came to thank me after class. From that day on, he started participating more actively, more confidently, reading louder and slower. Years later, he became a presenter. A compliment can be the seed of destiny. When you know how to use compliments as a mirror to reflect the good in others, you don't just make them happy, you make them see what they had forgotten they possessed. The more people see themselves through you, the more weight you gain in their eyes. A good speaker is not one who talks a lot, but one who makes others feel better about themselves when nearby. Complimenting is also a form of education. An intelligent person doesn't just use compliments to reward, but to guide. When you compliment someone for something they haven't perfected but have potential in, you plant a seed for growth. That's a very bright approach. If you delve deeper, it will be amazing. This statement both acknowledges and guides without hurting the other person, but making them want to take another step. What I've learned after decades of observing people, complimenting is not just an art of communication, but an expression of kindness. Complimenting incorrectly can make others suspicious, but complimenting from the heart always has the power to heal. It makes the world less cold. When we learn to see the good in others, we also gradually see the good in ourselves. And that is the most silent reward this art brings. The one who makes others feel honored is the one who has won without fighting. Because in this world, where everyone wants to be heard, only those who know how to listen and compliment at the right time are truly remembered. When you walk away and leave behind not applause, but a pleasant feeling in others' hearts, that's when you have reached the pinnacle of communication. There are times we think communication only happens when eyes meet, hands shake, and the air is filled with voices. But then one day, we realize there are conversations that happen when we are no longer there, when only our voice echoes over a phone line. No gaze, no smile, no posture to support the words. It is then that we understand the voice is the second face of a person. It carries energy, emotion, and wisdom without needing a physical form. When the other person cannot see us, they listen with all their other senses. A short breath, a laugh, or a long pause all become messages. The voice doesn't just transmit content, it transmits state. Some people only need to say, "hello," for us to want to stay. Others make us want to end the call immediately. Not because of what they say, but because they don't let their body be present in their voice. Wise communicators always know how to translate body language into sound. When they smile, that smile flows into their voice, warming the sound, spreading gently like vapor. When they nod, their is short, firm, weighty. When they want to show interest, they lower their voice, slow down to make the listener feel surrounded by attention. They don't let words float on the surface, they let them sink deep. In phone calls, what matters is not what we say, but what the other person hears in our voice. The voice is the only thing left when the face disappears. Therefore, learn to smile with your voice, nod with sound, and look with your breath. When we truly listen to someone, the other person can feel it, even through a small yes. When we smile genuinely, our voice will have a light, even if no smile is seen. A good telephone conversationalist is like a painter who paints with sound waves. They know when to prolong their voice to soothe, when to shorten it to create rhythm. They are not afraid of silence. They know silence is also a statement. A well-timed pause makes the other person feel that we are truly thinking about them, not just reciting. In the world of machine sounds, where everything is programmed regularly, it is the natural hesitation that is the sign of a real human. Just as in life, intimacy can be created even when we are hundreds of miles apart. Someone who knows how to use their voice will make others feel they are sitting opposite them, even if they are at opposite ends of the country. When you speak with presence, no one feels distant. This doesn't require tricks, just sincerity, because deep down, people always recognize when they are talking to a true heart. But just speaking well isn't enough. We need to know how to make others happy, they called us. A fresh, open, unhurried voice can turn an administrative call into a pleasant encounter. Every time you pick up the phone, imagine the person on the other end is a friend you haven't seen in a long time. Then your voice will naturally change softer, brighter, more sincere. They don't just hear what you say, they hear how you think about them. In business, there are gatekeeper secretaries, assistants who determine whether we can get close to someone. Many try to overcome them with tactics, but wise people take a different path. They make the gatekeepers want to open the door. A friendly, respectful, unhurried, non-demeaning voice is the only key. When you make them feel treated like a human being, they will help you access other doors without begging. One of the most subtle arts in conversation is reading emotions through another's voice. Listeners rarely say what they truly feel, but their tone will speak for them. Someone who says, "I'm fine," with a heavy breath and a forced laugh has already confessed the opposite. Those who know how to listen with both ears and heart will notice the smallest fluctuations in breath rhythm, pauses, or vocal tremors at the end of a sentence. When we recognize that and respond with genuine concern, the conversation becomes a sharing, no longer just an exchange. What many people forget, every voice is a small universe. It carries the speaker's memories, experiences, and moods. When we use it consciously, we are sending out a part of our soul. Therefore, never let your voice become soulless, monotonous like a machine. Let it have breath, rhythm, grimaces, and smiles. Let the listener feel that behind every word is a real person with thoughts, emotions, a heart. The voice is the second face, and sometimes even more real than the actual face. When you know how to speak as if you are touching the listener, when you let your breath and emotions guide you, you don't need to see them to connect. They will hear and realize that on the other end of the line is not just a voice, but a soul conversing with them. Someone once said, "If you want to know who is in charge of a room, watch who makes the atmosphere around them move." Indeed, in meetings, conferences, or parties, there are people who are not loud, not showy, yet all conversations naturally revolve around them. They don't try to get attention, they make attention come to them. That is the art of mastering space, communicating in a crowd like a politician. A person who enters a room as if they already belong there always has a different demeanor. They don't bow their head, don't rush, don't sneakily seek a safe corner. They stop right at the threshold, scan the room, and then smile as if this place has been waiting for them all along. Someone who knows how to master a room always enters with observation, not haste. They read the atmosphere before speaking. They notice who is conversing passionately, who is bored, who is looking for an exit. They choose the right spot to begin, neither randomly nor calculatingly, simply understanding the human rhythm. I once observed a politician at a large party. He didn't eat, even though the tables were laden with delicacies. His hands were always free to shake hands, to pat shoulders, to gesture, to exchange glances. He moved slowly, looking at each person with a gaze just long enough for them to feel noticed, then gently moved on before the conversation became drawn out. Everyone he met smiled as he left, as if they had just been granted something special. It wasn't his words that impressed them, but the feeling of being seen and respected. Someone who masters a space never lets themselves get drawn into a conversation for too long. They understand that communication in a crowd is not about digging deep, but about planting seeds. A good word, a glance, a handshake can become a door that opens later. They always leave a faint trace, enough for others to remember, but without making anyone feel overwhelmed. When speaking, they don't stand rigid like a guard, nor do they stoop too low. They lean slightly as if sharing a small secret, their voice warm, their gaze direct, their hands open, palms facing outward. That body language says, "I come to you not to impose on you." That is how powerful people build rapport. I once asked a woman, considered the soul of every party her secret. She smiled and said, "I never walk into a room thinking about who is important. I just ask, who needs someone to talk to?" That answer made me understand that charisma doesn't come from wanting attention, but from the ability to make others feel important. Someone who masters a space doesn't need to assert themselves, they allow others to shine. Sometimes, even a small action can create a big impact. A person standing at the door with light behind them turns their head to scan the entire room before entering. That gesture gives everyone a few seconds to look at them, and subconsciously, they've accepted them as a central part of the party. Presence is always created before words appear, and then when striking up a conversation, wise people don't ask empty pleasantries. They don't say, "How are you?" But I heard you just returned from Italy. Was the trip interesting? They don't ask, "What do you do?" But I heard you're leading a quite interesting project. Tell me a little about it. They turn questions into invitations to tell a story, making others feel interested rather than interrogated. Anyone who knows how to master a room will make everyone believe they are the center, even without saying much. They don't occupy space, they make space revolve around them. The difference lies in their entering with the intention to connect, not to conquer. When leaving a party, they don't disappear silently. They greet each person they've spoken to with a glance, a nod, a sincere promise to meet again. After the encounter, they remember small details. That man likes black tea. That girl collects small paintings. Someone else is looking to learn photography. These bits of information are not to be exploited, but so that next time they can pick up the conversation where it left off. When you remember something about others, they will never forget you. Communicating in a crowd is the art of brief, deep presence. You cannot control how others think of you, but you can control how they feel when they are near you. That's why truly successful people never try to impress. They let impressions form naturally through their gaze, their interest, their spirit. Remember that those who make a room shine are not those who bring in lights, but those who know how to reflect light from others. When you make someone feel important, you will become important in their eyes. And that is the secret every politician, leader, and master communicator knows. True power lies in the ability to make others radiate more when they are near you. There are unspoken boundaries we touch every day. These invisible glass ceilings exist in communication when we miss a word, lose eye contact, or leave someone embarrassed without knowing how to rescue them. Many believe power lies in sharpness, but true power lies in the ability to preserve another's dignity, even when they lose it. In those moments, a refined person doesn't see the mistake, doesn't hear the mistake, and doesn't mention the mistake. When someone spills a drink, mispronounces a word, or makes a slip of the tongue in a crowd, they don't show embarrassment or force a smile. They continue as if nothing happened. They don't rescue the other person with words, but with a silence broad enough to cover the awkwardness. And the other person will remember that forever, not for being forgiven, but for being respected. I once attended a lecture where a famous speaker suddenly forgot his words. The room fell silent. Someone in the front row gently nodded, smiled, then repeated his last phrase softly, as if reminding him without pity. The speaker continued immediately. When the talk ended, he sought out that person to thank them. A small action, but it's the art of helping someone regain the spotlight when they accidentally drop it. A person of high character doesn't try to stand out amidst others' mistakes. They don't seize the opportunity to prove they are better. They understand that in every situation, there's an invisible scoreboard everyone is watching. Every time we make someone lose face, even unintentionally, our score drops. But when we protect their dignity, our score naturally rises. Those at the pinnacle of society don't need anyone to explain this. They live by it as instinct. True power lies in the ability to help others maintain their dignity, even when they lose it. The strong person is not one who diminishes others, but one who helps them stand tall again. When someone is interrupted, pause and ask, "You were saying something very interesting. Please continue." When you see someone lost in a story, offer them a lifeline with your attention by gently asking, "Do you mean?" That action is like reaching out and pulling someone out of an awkward whirlpool. Sometimes, the glass ceiling lies within ourselves, in invisible limitations born of insecurity, of fear of judgment. A good communicator doesn't try to break through the ceiling with noise, but with calm. When others demean them with sarcasm, they don't counterattack, don't need to justify themselves. They just smile, letting silence act as a mirror. For the stillness of a steady person always makes the attacker see themselves shrink. I once witnessed a tense meeting where a young person, during a discussion, inadvertently said something that annoyed the boss. The whole room froze. The boss didn't react immediately. He took a sip of coffee and said, "That's an interesting perspective. I hadn't thought of it that way." That statement was both an escape route for the young person and a lesson for the entire room. No one was humiliated. Everyone maintained their respect. It was that composure that made everyone admire him. not because he was powerful, but because he was generous. In communication, there are small victories that only experienced people recognize. When you see someone struggling and don't let them feel exposed, you win. When you are misunderstood but don't rush to explain yourself, you win. When you help others save face, you save the entire relationship. Courtesy is not mere etiquette, it is the armor of dignity. There are also times when you need to confront jealousy. Some people can't stand it when you are well-liked. They will test you with light sarcasm, half smiles, or cold silence. Don't react. Let them see that you don't need to win with words. A person with inner strength always exudes a feeling that no one can destabilize them, because the highest point in the art of behavior is not being respected, but being trusted. People often think subtlety is an innate gift. But in reality, it's honed through times we choose silence at the right moment, yield at the right time, and speak the right thing. Subtlety is when we know we don't always need to speak the truth. Some truths are just for us to understand, not for anyone else to hear. Sometimes, a nod is enough to diffuse awkwardness, a smile enough to end tension. And so, as you walk through life, you not only learn how to speak, but how to ensure no one around you loses face. You become someone who makes others feel safe nearby, because they know that even if they misstep, stumble, or err, you won't diminish them. In a competitive world, people with this ability are rare, and because they are rare, they are remembered forever. Protecting others' dignity is the highest way to protect your own dignity. When you do that, all glass ceilings become transparent, and you pass through without breaking anything. In the atmosphere of every conversation, whether a meeting, a party, or a short call, there's always an invisible thing that few notice: the emotional scoreboard between people. Every action, every word, every glance, no matter how small, adds or subtracts a point on that board. No one openly scores anyone, but everyone feels it. And truly successful communicators always know how to keep their score high without competing. People often say, "Be humble." But few understand that humility is not about lowering oneself, but about holding firm to one's value without needing to boast. When you compliment others at the right time, when you truly listen, when you help others feel comfortable in your presence, your score increases. But when you interrupt, when you try to prove you're right, when you forget the name of someone who once remembered you, that score decreases. This scoreboard is not managed by anyone, but it determines who is loved, who is forgotten. The great secret in the sky, this invisible scoreboard, doesn't measure intelligence or success, but measures the humanity within us. Those with a high score are not those who always say the right thing, but those who make others feel respected. They remember small details: the type of tea a friend likes, the book someone is reading, or the sadness someone skillfully hides in their story. They don't use memory as a tool for manipulation, but as a thread for connection. When someone feels that you truly remember them, they will trust you with an unconscious trust in conversations. Some people think they win by talking more, by being more persuasive, but if the other person leaves feeling diminished, then even if you were right, you still lost. Winning in communication is not about making others submit, but about making them want to stay. There are people who speak very little, but when they do speak, everyone listens. Not because they are powerful, but because they have built trust long enough for every word to carry weight. A person with a high score doesn't need to be defensive. They are not afraid of others being better, nor do they worry about being overshadowed. They know their value lies in how they treat others, not in the spotlight on themselves. The higher their position, the softer their voice, the more they are praised, the more they share the credit. That composure makes everyone want to stand by them because they don't exude threat, but peace. There's a simple secret: if you make others feel intelligent, they will think you are a genius. Not because you're tricking them, but because you understand the law of the human heart. Everyone wants to be seen in their bright part. A well-timed suggestion, a "what do you think about that?" is enough to make them feel valuable. At that moment, you not only score points, but also make the relationship durable. This invisible scoreboard also measures consistency. A person can be charming at a party, but if they meet the next day and don't have the same warm gaze as before, that score will be lost. True courtesy is not a performance skill, but a habit of respecting others even when no one is watching. People with a natural demeanor make others feel at ease because they don't need to try. Sincerity cannot be faked, and pretense cannot last. But keeping a high score doesn't mean being rigid or always gentle. Sometimes, speaking the truth is the highest way to maintain a high score, as long as it's wrapped in kindness. A frank but warm critique will make the listener respect you. They might not like what you say, but they will remember that you dared to say it out of care. Master communicators don't shy away from the truth, but they also don't hurt anyone by speaking it. And as we live long enough, we will realize that what we thought was success money, fame, status can all be lost. But the score on that emotional board will remain forever in others' hearts. Others might forget what we said or did, but they won't forget how they felt when they were near us. Someone once said, "When you leave a room, what remains is the lingering impression. That's your true score. No one can steal it, nor can it be bought with flattery." Every day, we continue to write that score through every glance, every word, every action, and sometimes, just a sincere apology, a well-timed thank you, is enough to erase even past blunders. Important people don't try to be liked. They make others want to be near them because they feel respected, understood, and uplifted. When you walk through other people's lives and leave them feeling lighter and better than before, then even if no one scores you, you've still achieved a perfect score. Because ultimately, the art of communication is not a game to win, but a journey to understand, to connect, and to make the world around you kinder. And if you can do that, that invisible scoreboard, even if no one sees it, will always shine brightly with your name under the sky of lasting remembrance. The most peculiar thing about communication is not what is said, but how our presence changes others. Hodo Anion doesn't teach us how to win the game of words, but how to step out of it so that others can be seen, heard, and become themselves when standing beside us. The most important lesson of the book lies in the paradox. If you want to be captivating, don't try to captivate. Those who know how to listen are always more beloved than those who know how to speak well. Those who gently create a sense of safety are often remembered longer than those who persuade with intelligence, because people don't live by logic but by feeling. They will forget what they heard, but they will not forget the feeling of being looked at by someone with a non-judgmental gaze. In all relationships, two things never grow old: respect and attention. A simple sentence, when spoken with genuine care, can open a new life, but a right word spoken at the wrong time can close off an entire opportunity. Master communicators don't need to win the dialogue. They just need to let others walk away feeling that they have just become better. This book forces us to look at ourselves in the mirror of every encounter. Do I truly listen or just wait to respond? Do I speak to connect or to assert myself? Am I trying to impress, or am I helping others feel valued? Each of these questions, if answered honestly, will make us a little more silent. And it is in that silence that the ability to truly connect begins to form. There is a deeper layer that few notice. Communication is not just about understanding others, but about re-understanding ourselves. When we learn to listen, we discover forgotten soft parts within ourselves. When we learn to speak kindly, we reconnect with our humanity, something we once lost in the battles of winning and losing. Many read Hodo Anion to become more successful. But true success is not about being loved by many people, but about being understood deeply by at least one person. And sometimes, to be understood, we must first learn to understand. Therefore, what this book invites is not just skill training, but a subtle renovation. A renovation in how we look, how we ask, how we are silent, how we walk among others without making them feel small. Truly great people don't scare others, they make others feel at ease. Try to pause and think. In a world where everyone wants to speak, who is listening to whom? In social media, where everyone performs, is there anyone who truly pays attention to another person without expecting anything in return? And in your own life, when was the last time you made someone feel understood? If one day you no longer remember all 92 tips in the book, just keep one thing. Every time you say something, ask yourself, does this statement make the other person feel bigger or smaller? If it's the former, speak. If it's the latter, be silent. Because the time will come when, leaving an encounter, people won't remember what you wore, what you said, or how you smiled. They will only remember that being near you, they felt better. And if you can make others feel that way, then not just in communication, but in any space, you have truly succeeded. Perhaps the question that remains after all is, in an increasingly noisy world, do you want to be a voice that pushes into the crowd, or the silence that makes others want to draw near?